deliberating. Deliberating. Deliberating.
Dogfish.
Deliberating.
Dogfish. I'm the dude.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fight!
Greetings, everyone. We are Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes, and we have a very special show tonight with an extra special guest, Adam Wallace. We're joined by John Roeland and Benjamin Balderson, our regulars, and I am AlanMarcus.com. Let's get right started. Let's introduce John Roeland.
Hello, I am John Roeland, 1/3 of the Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes. You can find me at The Nuss and at Natural Freedom League, trying to help individuals use their autonomy to discover the Nuss, aka the Tao, aka the Way. First off, I say that to debate someone on a certain topic is just a technique to deliberate upon that topic in a deeper and more critical way by choosing sides. The definition of deliberate from Edom Online is from the mid-1500s, weigh in the mind, consider carefully, discuss and examine the reasons for or against. From Latin deliberatus, past participle of deliberare, consider carefully, consult, literally weigh well. From de, meaning entirely, and liberare, to free, liberate. From librare, to balance, make level. From libra, pair of scales, a balance. So I come here tonight not to win any debate, but to weigh carefully the merit and the flaw of two philosophies of life in order to find a balance internally and thus externally. As within, so without. I don't know much about heathenism. I've listened to some of the texts and I've done some research into the history. By engaging in this debate process, I have only enriched myself by showing it respect and looking at it again. I look forward to gaining even more clarity on it through this debate. The Norse tradition comes from an area of the world closer to my father's Dutch heritage than China, and yet I find myself taking up for Taoism in this debate because I resonate with the Taoist principles, and I believe Taoism to be the best prescription for our current condition and the best description of the true source of creation. Taoism is a Chinese philosophy that encourages living in harmony with the universe. It is based on the idea of the Tao, which is an impersonal process of change that underlies reality. The word Tao can be translated as way. Through the principles of detachment and non-strife, it emphasizes inner contemplation, mythical union with nature, and Wu Wei, which is the idea of non-action or letting things take their natural course. Taoism also teaches people to balance opposing forces, as represented by the Taijitu, more commonly known as the yin-yang symbol. The world needs to find balance and resolve the paradoxes. Taoism offers the path to do so. And I brought on my friend Adam, who has some experience in Taoism. And I'm going to let him introduce himself briefly, and then we'll pass it over to Ben.
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name's Adam Wallace. I've been studying and practicing traditional Chen Tai Chi and Wild Goose Qigong, as well as hard Qigong and Wing Chun. So I have like about 35 years practicing and studying, and about almost coming up to 30 years of teaching. So this is the first time I've actually done any podcast or had any broadcast or anything like this experience. So it's kind of new for me. I'd be looking forward to it. And so basically the Qigong and Tai Chi I do is founded on Taoist principles. I mean, I have done some study of it way back, but probably John actually has more knowledge of the history and, warring periods and everything. So, I mean, my kind of, I'm just coming from more experiential. The Qi is living it, basically. I kind of employ the the health practices of Taoism, the meditation practices, and try and get out into nature whenever possible. So basically all of the principles, some of which John mentioned, like yin yang, wu wei, which is basically effortless action and naturalness and non-attachment, basically doing it for what my goal is really longevity and sort of spiritual training really. And so I think one of the later things of Taoism, which wasn't in the original one, was sort of honoring the ancestors. So that's something I've come across just through my traditional practices. So it's more of a kind of gratitude from the knowledge that's been handed down over the generations and whatnot. And the main thing with Taoism for me is like really a harmony with nature, simplicity, which unfortunately technology is kind of contrary to that. You have to kind of live with it, but I kind of try and stay away from tech as much as possible, and sort of avoiding stress, more tranquility for the mind. You see more clearly develop this more spiritual things when the mind's quiet. So I've studied under sort of some kind of traditional lineages, some which one goes back about 1800 years, and it can be traced back up to the recent ancestors, this kind of thing. So that's basically it. I mean, I say debating forum is new for me. I'm more of a writer. I've written, although not published a book yet, but I've written for a variety of magazines going back to Journal of Asian Martial Arts, Inside Kung Fu, Wushu Kung Fu, The Empty Vessel, which was actually a contemporary Taoist publication. I don't think that's still around now. And I had a column in Chi magazine for about 10 years. And that's about it, really. So I'm kind of looking forward to also learning a little bit more about heathenism too, and if there's any similarities. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam Wallace. Up next, we want to hear from Benjamin Balderson, dispenser of caustic wisdom.
Hey, guys, and don't feel bad, Adam. We are also very new to the debate format, so it's going to be a little wonky, and we're taking this time period ahead of time to try and work out our own kinks, so that way we don't get treated like boxing clowns when we get in there with people that this is their typical format. But I find, like John said pre-show, that through this format, we're going to find some growth where when you just present and nobody challenges the things that you say, you can have glaring, obvious holes in the things that you're thinking and never notice because you're in an echo chamber. And so I feel like personal growth, this is going to be really good. But that was not my presentation or my opening. So hello, my name is Benjamin Balderson. You can find me on Weaving Spiders Webs Saturday evenings, on Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes Tuesdays, or by typing in my name in YouTube or your favorite application. I'm speaking at the upcoming Flattoberfest event in September in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I'm happy to be here tonight debating the application of heathenism versus Tao on society with John and Adam. I think this is going to be an interesting debate because I have no real preconceived notions about Tao, with most of my study and focus being on Western society. With that, my concentration on the opening will be on heathenism. The religion I follow is Odinism, which is heavily entrenched into the society, but the tenets of Odin do not have what you would normally consider a heavy religious connotation, as most will discover while this gets more fleshed out. Religiously, the book most heavily followed is called the Havamal, and that is divided into 3 sections: host, or how you treat others from the world; how to act as a guest; and wisdoms of the world. Rather than what you would typically consider religious, you will find things like the need to be hospitable to strangers that happen upon your land. These people lived in very harsh conditions, and the person turned away had a good chance of dying. I know basic human decency today seems odd to hold as a religious tenet, but I believe it has been lost in today's world in general. The measure of a society is the people it produces. There has been no society that produces such competent individuals as heathen society. Despite the modern portrayal of barbaric drunkards who rape and steal, propaganda taught by Latin-driven colleges in Hollywood, Heathen society was fair and honest, where honor and respect were keys. One of the standards used in today's world to measure the decency of a society is their treatment of women. You will find in heathen culture, women were allowed to own property, speak, take part in their own defense, and divorce if their husband did not act responsibly or decently. This was a class system, but not a stagnant class system. This meant a recognition of who people are, similar to the story of the scorpion and the frog, where their own actions placed their position in society. In a time when slavery was legal in most of the world, heathen society had laws protecting these people from mistreatment. I do not know what a Tao society looks like, but I do know that a society that lives by honor, respects and rewards skill, where strength is used to protect the weak, and where common decency is the rule, that is a society I would be a part of.
Thank you, Balderson. That gets us right into our topic of debate tonight, which is there's a decline of Western civilization. We're living through a collapse, economic, societal, moral, all the things that keep a society together seem to be failing systems. So tonight we have two sides presenting their idea for moving forward in our Western civilization. We recognize that we're speaking English, we're living in America, we have a government election coming up this year. All of these issues are coming to head, and our two sides tonight are here to debate with solutions from their perspectives. So we are recording live Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. This is our sixth episode of Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes, and we're ready to kick it off. John Roeland, do you have an opening argument statement?
Sure. One of the points I wanted to hit on is the history of and longevity of Taoism. So Taoism was written basically based on a book by Lao Tzu, who he's one of these mysterious characters. Did he really exist? Is he a culmination of a bunch of different people? So I think we're going to see that on both sides of this discussion. But Lao Tzu allegedly worked for the empire, like the different emperors and the different empires of the time, as a council who consulted the Yi Jing. So this man was well versed in the Yi Jing. The Yi Jing goes back to the legend of Fu Shi, the first Chinese emperor, who was standing by the Yellow River, and a turtle came out of the water, and on his back was the symbols for the Yi Jing. I don't know if it was all 64 symbols or if it was just the first 8 trigrams, but this became an oracle that became used. It was one of the widest, I think it's like, I've heard, again, legends, that it's the only book that survived the burning of the books in China. And again, they would read it as like, do we go to war? What do we do? And so Lao Tzu, as an old man, left this position, was leaving to go live, off the land, away from the empire. And a man asked him to write a book about what he understood, and he wrote the Tao Te Ching. So my point on this is that Taoism is sort of a culmination, in my perspective, of thousands of years, because Fu Shi was alleged to be alive between the 2900 or 2000 BC. So we're going way back in ancient history, and this Yi Jing, has continued to influence society through Taoism one way, but then also, it's the binary code, it's what runs all computers. And so one reason why I think it's a powerful philosophy to follow and look at is because of its longevity and how long it has survived. And has like now, and then I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, to clarify, the point that you're making in your opening argument is the longevity of Taoism proves its value to society.
Yes, and compared to heathenism, heathenism seems to be what, let's say, the Norse Vikings. They seem to be a newer. I don't know. Like this might be getting too deep, but maybe a newer version of humanity. It might sound weird, but a new approach. Now, this may be based on where they're from, but that belief system from the Norse seemed to die off for a long time and not arise again till I believe it was the 1800s.
Okay, those are fighting words. We have argument for the longevity of Taoism versus the seemingly recent rise of heathenism compared to thousands of years of this wisdom collected by Lao Tzu. What say you, Balderson?
So poor John shows his United States Western learning, which is primarily movies, and so with that you get these ideas, and I'm not even being critical of John. Like, you take the most recent in this fashion, because here's an honest thing right here. Odinism was one of the last things that I came to. For some reason, there's such a heavy white guilt placed that our own culture that is literally my own salt. Like, I'm extraordinarily Northern European in my bloodline, and that was one of the last things I came to. And for some reason, that's very dismissed by white culture, because I think white guilt is where I would place that. But in reference to the in response to the time period, again, that's just flat ignorance on the subject where it's not been studied out. So there's three basically different periods you can separate the heathens into. There's the pre-Viking era. The era that John is talking about is the Viking era, which is the second, what you would call the second era. And the Viking era was in response to a bunch of events in the pre-Viking era. So the Viking era is approximately 800 AD to like 1050, 1100 AD, somewhere in there. So that is a fairly short duration, as John pointed out. Now, the thing about the Viking era is as Hollywood tries to portray, especially in the most recent Vikings TV show on History Channel, which was very popular, they pretend like this church Lindisfarne, suddenly these people nobody's ever heard of before that are just mystical show up and just start fucking up churches. Like, hell yeah, these monks don't fight. We're stealing their shit. In order to make that case, you have to pretend like that was the first incident, that Northern Europe was not consistently trading and interacting with each other, that things like the Irminsul tree, where Charlemagne went, and this is before the Viking period started. Charlemagne, everybody's heard of him, went and slaughtered thousands and thousands of Danes and then cut down the sacred Irminsul tree. See, we as heathens, our sacred worship thing is a tree. It's not a church. So to us, cutting down that tree and burning down that church, they're equivalent. In fact, they used the trees of our sacred holy places to build those churches right on the sites. Talk about desecration. So the Viking age, they can pretend like a bunch of guys just went crazy stealing stuff, or we can recognize that prior to the Viking age, we also had St. Boniface and Donar's tree, where he literally went up and they were going to force convert the Christian people or the heathen people, and anybody that would not get baptized was crucified. they cut down Thor's tree. Are you kidding me? And even today in Germany, there is a plaque and a commemoration to this over and over because of Hollywood, because we live in a Judeo-Christian world, which these two gentlemen are not representing, and I'm not pretending that they are. But there's been a Latin versus Germanic war for years and years, and this debate doesn't really cover that because they're debating out of the Eastern world, which is not our society. But because of this Latin versus Germanic war that has happened, which Hollywood's owned by folks from the Latin world, so are the school systems, the Germanic people get portrayed in a very specific way. So suddenly we have the Viking era, which is crazed Vikings who, never mind that we just went and slaughtered bunches of their people and cut down their holy things. That doesn't count. Why are these guys here burning our church? Such dicks. So that to take that side of it, though, is even though I understand it's out of ignorance. So to further that, we have pre-Viking era. So the Germanic people, they did exist. You once again are taking then the collegiate view, where the collegiate view is specifically the Greek and Roman view, where when Alexander the Great and the people of the Greek and that area of the Mediterranean Sea claimed this is the world, very, very Abrahamic, right? This is the world. These are the first people. But then there's these other people over here. Alexander the Great did the same thing. This is the world. And then there's the barbarian lands. And there's people over there. And those people do have gods and systems and societies. And funny enough, when we tried fighting with them, they were superior to us. But they're barbarians. They don't count. So that you are also now taking that position of the Latin collegiate system, which then tries to not recognize that prior to any of that, the heathen system was always in place and has always, if you put any study into it, keeps cropping up over and over and over. So this longevity argument holds zero weight.
Okay, I want to follow up real quick. Just so I, and again, like a lot of the things you're saying, I'm not making those assumptions, but what I'm saying is, so if we say time frame, so maybe like 2,000 years ago, there were Germanic tribes living that were called pagans, or that were thought of as pagans, and they believed
in today's vernacular, brother, just so you're clear. I'm not trying to stop your point, but just clearing this up so you don't go the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Pagans is typically associated with a more Celtic bent. That's going to be your more the more English in the area, and then Odinist, the Germanic pantheon, is typically more considered the heathen. So there is a bit of a separation there. Not a lot of people make it, especially in today's Wiccan world where they just kind of mush everything together and claim it. So we were heathen. The Germanics were heathens, okay. And then the pagans were mostly the Celts, the Gauls, those types.
Okay, because like again, when I'm searching these terms on the mainstream sources, right? This is Google AI, so take that for what it's worth. It says the term Odinism was first used by Scottish writer Thomas Carlyle in 1841, and then like when you go back, you see that okay, like the Vikings believed in it, but they're like 8th century, right, BC. So like
once again, that's Viking era, John. So those people, just because the era switched, those people didn't suddenly appear like magic. You understand that? So the Viking era is the era where there was a war between specifically Christians and heathens. Heathens existed and had an entire flourishing society up previous to that point.
Right. That's and then so the Viking era happens. So that's an action they took, which was to like go to other lands to take their lands. And like in some things I read that they came back and they attacked monasteries, right? Which goes along with what you're saying. if the Christians had already attacked them, that they would have attacked the monasteries. But again, I'm going to just say, strengthening the side of the Taoist argument is just, it's a more ancient wisdom. It seems to me. I'm trying to go like, where does Odinism begin?
I mean, you're just like pulling that on a feeling. You're giving there's zero backing to what you're saying.
Well, I'm asking, like, what society
I can't properly date.
Ago.
Nobody knows how to properly date ours, and I would honestly venture to say nobody can properly date yours either. And I openly admit that. There's
That's a good point. That's a good point, and I agree with that.
You know,
I'm just going off the mainstream, what I know, what I've learned about, and just what we've learned about the cultures in general. I mean, Chinese does seem to come from like an even more ancient past that I don't see accounted for like what were Europeans doing at that time. You know, like 2000 BCE. Like, what were the northern people?
What do you imagine that they were doing, John?
I guess not recording what they were doing, you know, or not in the way that the Chinese were. So I'm just pointing to that.
I would definitely agree with that. That the northern traditions were tended to be more oral, although in that they're finding more and more rune stones that they're not even the dates that we're given are exceedingly out of the range that we were ever told, and that's if they're that date. So that's again depending on how much you look into it.
You got anything to add in, Adam?
I mean, not really. I mean, I know that like certain Qigong has been traced back 5,000, 7,000 years. I don't know whether, I'm assuming that was based on Taoist philosophy. So, you know, beyond that, no, I don't know. I can tell you.
I think I'm pointing to, I could be wrong. This is, again, my intuition is that maybe there was like some new kids on the block, like the Aryans. Right, they were kind of maybe they arrived here or emerged here later than the Chinese. The Chinese had already been here in prehistory. They had.
So you think white people derived from Chinese people? Is that what you're?
No.
So I'm
saying that people arise out of different areas. Life arises. I don't know how it gets here. I don't know how it gets here. But for if you look at like Rudolf Steiner, which I quote a lot, and you know, he has some out there ideas, he looks at like the long history of the different root races, and like that it you know, there is an idea that like after the Atlanteans come the Aryans. So is it pointing to an evolution? And I'm not saying that makes that heathenism wrong or Aryanism wrong if it's, you know, just a new race or a new root race of humanity. That the ancient one that has lasted is, to me, it's not, well, I guess I'm like defeating my point. It's not more it's not more valuable, but it's something worth looking at, this thing that has lasted thousands of years and that teaches a peaceful approach to solutions, a more internal. So that is maybe a different argument. But
thank you, John. Adam, did you have anything to add to the longevity?
No, I mean, obviously they're both very old systems that probably, due to their age, have, you know, weight on them. I mean, if one's older than the other, I don't know if it gives any more credibility to what we're talking about, you know?
Sure. So that brings us to maybe the next argument that I will raise for both sides with this idea
I don't get a chance to respond here, Marcus.
You had the argument. John had the rebuttal. Do you have a rebuttal to his rebuttal?
Well, yes. I don't get a chance to do this?
Go ahead.
The rebuttal.
The rebuttal.
Rebut.
Yeah, so what are you
I'm
rebutting?
I'm the fucking goat here, man. You know I'm a butt.
Yes.
I didn't mean the GOAT like greatest of all time. I've barely even done this. I meant GOAT like fucking headbutting. So you threw a lot of things out there, John. And what I'm gonna point out for you on the most is what I was able to grab together out of that was a whole lot of Theosophical Society stuff. And so what we had was the Theosophical Society at some point became basically mainstream because they became the spiritual wing of the UN. And a lot of these things you just said, like even Atlantean, the entire true, not channeled, not I had a dream, not some spirit messaged me. The true history of Atlantis is it Socrates? Socrates said some guy that he talked to that was a great teacher talked about it and he heard it. That is the entirety of the knowledge of Atlantis. So a lot of these things that you're saying, again, and you even immediately after I explained how the raids and how Charlemagne and his people came in and Christianized and killed, you went taking land. You immediately reverted back to the today culture of, well, yeah, the Viking era, them fuckers came raiding and stealing and pillaging. Not the Christians took those lands, force converted some of our people, destroyed our holy things, but suddenly in 800 AD, Vikings magic appeared. They're very angry. They're very pillagey. Again, that's to absolutely ignore the entire history before that. That like you watched Vikings, and that's the actual history of the world. And I understand that to look these things up on Google, it takes a little effort, especially in with heathenism, because again, in the Latin world, they've tried to stomp that down with a jackboot like you wouldn't believe. And then you have to add in the convoluted Marvel nonsense, which is 99% of what you're going to pull up. Like the first 800 pages are going to be mostly Marvel or a video game. And so to actually get down to the root of things definitely takes some work and some effort. Even for most heathens, they at best have glanced through the Eddas, which is one tiny source by a Christian monk. I don't know what to say about that. Like, people have no interest in studying, which is part of why heathen society, in my opinion, would be better. Because to have a society where it's so laissez-faire about the way things are and everybody just does what they want, I've personally noticed that most people are extraordinarily incapable of taking care of themselves, and most of those people would just die. And the same people that would promote this type of society also promote a welfare society. So then what really happens is the people like me provide for all the rest, and that's not a real good society. So I'm not sure where this goes.
Just curious, obviously out of all the religions, I mean, Taoism is probably practiced less than Buddhism, but I'm just curious, like in terms of heathenism, even though it's suppressed, are there many, like, how big is the influence or practitioners of that, would you say?
Germania was a giant area, so anything that you now would consider Northern Europe. Again, I have to make this distinction because, so like the pagan worlds, which included mostly around the Mediterranean, 99% of the time when you're looking up things about pagans, they're talking about Rome. And the Roman pagan pantheon is the only one that is recognized. And again, you can see this literally in like the works of like Alexander the Great and whatnot, where everything he conquered was the world, which included this Mediterranean area. And they literally refer to Northern Europe, which is everything north of that, which is a vast swath of people. As a matter of fact, these people, Rome in its entire history, only one time met another people like that, where 3 Roman legions went up to Germania and faced 6 out of like hundreds of German tribes. 6. 3 Roman legions marched into Germania, 0 people came home. And it never happened in the history. These were advanced people. These were not to be pissed with. And they just don't hold the history. You can even see this in like colleges. Do you know that part of the that when you look back and you actually study things like illiteracy, you were considered illiterate if you couldn't read Latin. So you could read German, you could read Danish, you could read, lots of languages, but you're an illiterate because you can't read Latin. And we all kind of know this because we were somewhat taught this in school, that the common people, the church spoke in Latin, so the normal people couldn't read the Bible. Well, what? Hold on. I thought they couldn't read. They were illiterate. No, they couldn't read Latin. So they had their own culture, their own language, their own religion. It's just not recognized in the Latinized colleges and the Latinized propaganda machine of the media in Hollywood. And no, there wasn't as many white people as there were Chinese people. Absolutely not. So that is a fact. There was more of them. 100%.
So that does bring up the issue of how does Taoism handle the violence, raids, and invasions if the argument is that this will be a better way forward for Western society, maybe more specifically America or whatever Western society is, how does Taoism handle war, violence, instigations, borders, this type of thing?
Okay, I can just add something on, like the Tai Chi I studied comes from a farming village in Henan province. And these people, they've had to repel invaders several times. So obviously they're well versed in martial arts and everything. And so following Taoism, obviously it's not to be non-violent entirely, but it's always to seek the path of least resistance. So you're always, the principle of Tai Chi itself is you're never attacking force against force. You're attacking the enemy where they're weaker. So some of that can go back to Sun Tzu as well. You can feign weakness, and you're basically attacking the enemy where they're weaker. There's different strategies for this, but obviously it's not that Taoism is non-violent. If it has to be action, then there is action, but it's always to seek the path of least resistance. And a lot of times, like Wu Wei is taken as non-action, but it doesn't mean that really. It just more means like you following the natural path, like, fish following the stream or flowers, bending toward the light. It's not to, cause an unnecessary struggle. So, as in like Chen Wang-ting, the guy that founded, actually his ancestor, Chen Fa-ke, 17th generation, he said a fight shouldn't last more than 3 seconds. So, it's really, because if it goes on longer than that, it's fighting is effort. So the idea is to have a skill whereby, you're not actually fighting. But you have, obviously, there is violence. They've had to defend themselves, as in many tribes of the warring states, everything. But it's inevitable. But and the other thing in Taoism is it's not about gloating or, celebrating death, this kind of thing. It's like once once the objective is completed, that's kind of it. It's just you do what's necessary and then retreat. That's the principle, from my understanding of Taoism, how it handles it.
Yeah, that's why I invited Adam here. Because I would just say, like, philosophically, it's more about how you are organizing society so that there aren't going to be violence, raids, invasion. And also based off kind of what Adam said, I think that, first of all, Taoism rose out of the warring states period, which I don't know a lot about, but clearly there were wars between different groups in China. But I looked up like China as a whole, like why did China never like start again, like conquering the world? And basically it was saying that they had everything they needed. And so to me, their whole approach is more of a defensive. If they're going to get attacked, they'll defend themselves. But in general, they're establishing society. And I'm not arguing for Chinese society at this point. I'm saying that the principles, the values of that defensive position that China takes probably does come from Taoist thought. There's no official government or a religion in China, but they do acknowledge Taoism, Buddhism, and Christianity and Catholicism. So, and Islam. So, anyway, I would just say, like there's a line in the Taoism that the more weapons you have, the less safe you are, or, it's like that. It's more, I guess, mind over matter is a good way to put it.
Balderson, your response to Taoism is not nonviolent. It is not non-action. They have martial arts. They have Tai Chi. They attack weaknesses, this type of thing.
The inaction course just doesn't make any sense to me societally. From what I've seen of what I've looked up of Taoism, which again, it was as cursory as John's searches. So I'm certainly not representing that was good information by any means. Because the fact is you got to start at those cursory areas. So you even have a place to go from. So again, not being hard on that, since neither of us are particularly aware of the other person's thing. But as far as being in a monastery, that sounds great. And I mean, a little bit to some degree, that sounds good. Like myself, I try not to go outside during the heat of the day because it sucks. All the animals lay down. When people ask me why I take a nap in the middle of the day and don't do work, I'm like, look at everything else on the farm. It's all hiding in the shade, laying down. Why wouldn't I? You go with the flow. I get it. Why try and skate uphill? On the same token, if something happens and I have some higher need, and that's what being a higher person and with a higher understanding is, then I'm going to go ahead and step out of that comfort zone and start making things happen, which is typically where society has to go when you're trying to build a society. So that sounds functional to me for living in a monastery, but I'm not sure how that functions as a society. Now, I noticed, and I'm going to have to ask in the response, is these martial arts, I noticed, and I was going to ask this earlier, it's one of the things I'd written down, that you listed a number of martial arts along with this spiritual practice. So is that always a tie that those things go together? And if so, I wouldn't, we'll go ahead and respond to that right here.
I was just going to say, like the actual definition of martial arts in Chinese word is wushu, and it means stop fighting technique. So it comes back to the thing again. It's like the idea is if your skill is good enough, you can actually use it maybe diplomatically, whatever, that you actually avoid the confrontation. You fight when you have to fight, but it actually means stop fight. People think kung fu is martial art. Actually, kung fu just means practice, and practice could be anything. It could be a chef with his cleaver. It could be any type of kung fu is just skill based over time and energy spent on it. But the actual word,
the two are always tied together.
What's it? Yeah, I mean, somebody who is the martial art is kung fu. Yeah, basically, it's kind of become the definition of that. But the real word.
I'm saying Tao, and do all Tao practitioners also practice some form of martial art?
I would say not. It's a bit like Buddhist, like Buddhism, like Shaolin is a Buddhist sect of martial art, but not all Buddhists. Even Buddhist monks practice martial art or Shaolin. It's just
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with them defending, with their abilities to defend themselves. I have no problem believing that. Outside of obviously, we've all seen the videos where today's MMA fighters go against most of these different ancient Chinese arts, and they don't do well at all, real bad. Like guys that
the topic, but I mean, the bottom line is those guys that they portray as masters. It's like the worst of the worst. I don't know what the hell.
I definitely won't disagree with that, and actually, I can 100% believe it. I'm not going to argue that at all. So I will take your word on that without any dispute. So as far as from my point as heathen society, so that way it's not just me punching bagging on the other side. Obviously, heathens are fairly well known for their ability at self-defense, and it wasn't through actually being a particularly martial society. This is the reason that they were so well known for an axe, is because that was just what these were. Farm people that lived in the forest like me, they swung an axe all day. Funny enough, a tree is much tougher than a human when you hit it with an axe. Like, your human skin and bones and muscle give like butter, and trees are super hard. So if you have been splitting trees all day and using an axe, when you swing that at a human, it's going to do real big bad things. And these were just genetically gigantic people. So, you look at even Iceland today, like 6 out of the 10 strongest men in the world are from Iceland, and Iceland only has a population of 300,000, which is mind-boggling that many gigantor men all come from that tiny area. On the flip side, they do have an app that's like, find somebody that you're not related to sleep with over there. So there is that. These were gigantic people. And so they just, the defense was part of being a very self-sufficient and independent person. So this was something you normally had to practice. The basis of the society was free men that were basically together under a jarl. And so these men each independently ran their own homestead, which was going to need defended. It was going to need to be organized. You're going to need to take care of your people. All these things had to happen in a microverse. And so the macroverse of it was very much the same. And it was very easy for them. It's not until their interactions with the Roman world and the Abrahamic world that you started seeing them really wander as warriors, which they were then exceptionally valued for, where you see like the Varangian guards and any of the top people of Constantinople brought Vikings over in order to be their personal guards. And they did so well that they were given, these were Rus Vikings, so they were given the area of Russia in payment for their service upon release, and now we have Russia. So these were well-known warriors, but it wasn't a warrior society. They didn't have any more or less infighting than any other tribal society. And as far as John's point to China never expanding, China's never expanded because it's never stopped infighting. The idea of a united China, even today, is absolutely insane. That's why when like Japan conquered China, then you go and look at it and they conquered like this tiny little tiny thing, and China's like this. They're like, hold on. So in no way, that's why you have so many overlapping dynasties historically, where if you go back and start matching them up, it's not a chronological order thing. There's different dynasties existing in different areas, and they're so busy fighting with each other that they just never expanded out. And honestly, in between that and the Northern European area was the Huns. And even the Vikings didn't want to fight Huns. Nobody wanted to fight Huns.
Well, it's interesting to think too about just how the Middle East connects these two, over time, because again, like you're saying, like that mentality to like conquer the world is more from Roman, Greek, and again, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. It obviously needed to happen for some reason, right? Like it happened, like this is where we are. But yeah, I do think there's a distinction there just between Chinese culture, Eastern culture, and Western. where Western was like somehow there was an urge to conquer the world, right? Like unite the world into
Well, I
one
think you
thing.
nailed it though with the and here's where we're not going to have an argument, and this is where things get kind of weird, right? Because normally you have we would be going against an Abrahamic person, but both of us managed to be holding cultures that did not do this so much. So when you look at it, the Abrahamic culture, and even when you look at their stories, they're the only culture that has the story of Babylon. Every other culture has flood. Every other culture there's a number of events that every other culture has, but the Tower of Babel, that only exists in Abrahamic because they're the only giant society people. So when you look at it, even when like your claims in the Telegram when we were chatting back and forth, getting a feel for the information the other one's going to bring out. Forgot where I was going.
Yeah, so then can we get a response from Adam about society based on Taoism existing at large outside of a monastery?
Well, just can I quickly go back to the thing of the violence as well? Because if I can read something from the Tao Te Ching, right? Talking about, not wanting rare things keeps the people from thievery. Not paying attention to the desirable keeps the hearts of the people from disaster. This is why the sage governs himself by relaxing the mind, reinforcing the abdomen, gentling the will, strengthening the bones. Actually, a lot of people don't realize that this book is actually kind of a high-level Qigong text, because it's talking the last part in particular. So it's talking about self-development, ultimately, relaxing the mind, reinforcing the abdomen, because when you're doing internal practices like Tai Chi, and it's all about abdomen breathing and gentling the will, strengthening the bones. This is all internal training. But just going back to the previous is about keeping people from, wanting to conquer other villages and that. Not to say that it didn't happen, but since this book has been written, it's the higher cause of the Taoist not to be, competing for somebody else's property and possessions, this kind of thing. And then it also mentioned about fine weapons are not auspicious instruments. Everything hates them. Therefore, practitioners of Tao will have nothing to do with them. In every day, I'll skip a little bit of this. Where's it now? Yeah, since weapons are inauspicious instruments, they are not the instruments of a noble man. He uses them only when necessary, for peace and quiet are what he holds highest. To him, even a victory is not worthy of celebration. Those who celebrate it take pleasure in the slaughter of men. Those who take pleasure in the slaughter of men consequently cannot have their will with the world. So that's kind of like the idea of how it's.
But I mean, that is why I asked if there's a separation between the what we would call martial arts and the Tao, because
yeah.
So then what you would be representing then is Tao, including martial arts as a societal prescription.
Yeah, I mean, martial arts evolved out of necessity. So, I mean, it's one of those things. It's a bit like Chinese medicine. It's all about preparation or prevention, really. So Chinese medicine says, the beauty of Chinese medicine is prevention. So they say, you want to forge the weapons before the war is, caused. You want to dig the well before you're thirsty. So it's there as preparation and as a last resort kind of thing. So, martial arts developed out of necessity. But ideally, a high-level Taoist is not looking to conquer and subdue and subjugate and oppress, this kind of thing. It's just contrary to Taoist thought.
So I recall what I was going to say about expansion. And again, this is why the expansion argument is not really one to have between us. So it's kind of an odd one. Where John brought up some of the figureheads historically, by the time the Northern Europeans had kings, that any of the kings that he looks up and is going to go ahead and name that have brought about fame, such as like Harold Bluetooth, and Bluetooth was named after Harold Bluetooth, blah, blah. He ate blueberries. Yay, yay. Well, Harold Bluetooth, what he was an absolute traitor that let his own people be slaughtered by Roman soldiers and had his guys open the doors, because they're friends. And this is what you're going to find over and over again. And then what you're going to find is then they all had subservience then to Roman king or a small hat king along those lines, and then you see the entire area get subverted. So the kings, the royal lines, always have to draw back to Israel, right? You already knew that. So is Israel in Northern Europe? Is that in Germany or Iceland or anything? And so to claim that those are, you understand that expansion just happened to us. So we didn't join it. It already happened to us. We were a victim of said expansion. And they just had to do it in a much more subtle way, because when they tried to do it by force of arms, that's when the Battle of Teutoburg Forest happens and you send in legions and then nobody comes home. And you're like, that's never happened before. That's very weird. And things like the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where one lone heathen held off an entire Roman legion long enough for a battle to completely take place that was going to go around and flank his side. And one heathen who's not a trained warrior, who's not in anything special, holding his axe from home, said, "You shall not pass." And a whole Roman legion had to respect that. That's who you're dealing with.
I want to respond to Marcus's question about can a society based on Taoism exist outside a monastery? I would say yes, but it would look very different than the society we have right now. So you might not even call it a society. I don't know. I just think it's more about the internal government. It's not saying there doesn't have to be government, but if the people in government, if the king doesn't wear fine things, then people aren't going to want for fine things, right? So if the king had this philosophy in mind about
I actually want to simplify the question a little bit and let you keep going, John. I want to boil it down to, is esoteric fit for the general society as opposed to exoteric? Because that's really what you're trying to push. Whether I'm not even trying to go against the tenets of the higher spiritual tenets that it's presenting. Do you think that that something that is such an esoteric, very individualized thing could ever hold sway over a larger amount of people, which would also include the derivative of, do you believe that the exoteric is in order to hide the esoteric from the common people? So if you could flesh that out completely, please go, but please simplify that down.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say yes. I would argue yes, that esoteric can be now taught to everybody. It can be widespread through technology, and that there's an automatic tie between Taoism and Buddhism. I mean, they basically arose at the same time. And to me, when I've studied, I read Taoism and then I go practice Buddhism. To me, Buddhism is the practical method of getting to this space of emptiness and just sitting in it and connecting with that source, the Tao, and that it is being taught. And like, I feel like, to me, even though it's esoteric, it's also done in such a way where it's more just self-help. You could just call it self-help. You don't have to market it as esoteric. Again, simple things like breathing, meditating, a regular practice.
About the marketing of it, I'm talking about, do you think the general public is capable of having any use of esoteric, that they would be able to apply that to themselves in any way, shape, or form.
I think the ones who would be against, quote unquote esoteric would not even realize that it's esoteric. I mean, like, it's kind of like what's happened with yoga, right? Like, they're practicing it, and a lot of people don't know the spiritual depth of it or history of it. And yeah, I do. I mean, if you couldn't tell already, I'm an eternal optimist. Like, I do believe we can turn it around. I try to look at what happened with the Western world was for a purpose, for us to level up in consciousness, and that it would be to widespread this type of practice and understanding, because then you would have people with values who were not needing to get more, have more money, and again, not that there's anything wrong with money, but it's it's believing that we need that keeps us in that cycle. And so that's my thought.
I mean, do you have anything to add to that before I go, Adam?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think it's a question of, I think this society we're in right now, I don't think is ready for anything different. I mean, it's become so removed from the natural way and from sufficiency. It's constantly, I mean, the television, most people are television watchers these days, and the television's telling them to consume. I mean, even after 9/11, if you remember, the president of the country told everybody to go shopping. You remember? I don't even remember that, but it's kind of like, it's an instruction: go shopping. That'll heal.
WMD's got to be somewhere. Ha ha ha.
Exactly. Yeah, but so anyway, the society's is so far removed. It's all about convenience. It's all about fame. And now we've got like the social media platforms, TikTok, and that. Everybody's constantly, they're in a different space. So I don't think this society, I'll be honest with you, right now as it stands, could be educated in either Taoism or heathenism as it stands. There would have to be some breakaway civilization. That's my...
Gentlemen, I have to remind you, this is a debate. All this agreeing is not great for our ratings and our listening audience. We need more heat. We need more intense argument. We need disagreement. So then the question, I guess, we have to force answer now is, are heathenism and Taoism compatible or incompatible?
Well, I want to respond to everything that was just said first, but
right. Yeah.
I would say, there, for me, well, heathenism is a tribal society and it's polytheistic. So the two, I don't see where they would have an issue with each other, to be honest, in any way, shape, or form. If you wanted to practice that, again, not all Germanic tribes practiced. Not everybody was an Odinist. In fact, Thor or Donar was much more popular than Wotan, and he was considered a farmer's god, the common person's god. And there's even stories, one where Odin disguises himself and won't let Thor pass and starts making disparaging remarks about the common people and how he would hang out with them. And this is one of the first things that truly enrages Thor, is just the disparaging remarks of the common people. So he was the more popular god, depending on village to village or whatever. So I agree with Adam 100% that I don't think our society, the heathen society, requires rugged individualism and extreme self-reliance. And I don't know, really, that is not a descriptor to use for our society in any way, shape, or form. So that would have to be an extreme difference. I don't know if I would agree that there has ever been a general society that was capable of understanding esoteric. I think that esoteric has always been a thing because most people have no interest in thinking for themselves and guiding themselves and even learning about themselves and really understanding themselves. Most people, they don't care. That I don't think that's ever been a driving force for the majority of people. I think that's why they've always hid esoteric stories inside of exoteric stories, because then the exoteric story carries on because that's entertaining to the commons, and then the people that are going to actually pull something from that, it's always been there waiting, and that it's just waiting for the right person to open it up. If you read something like the Kabbalion, which I'm sure everybody in this debate has, the first time you read it and the 10th time you read it are two different things entirely. Like, it's like two different fucking books. So and that information was always there. It's you that changed. And I don't think that the general society ever is going to be able to operate on an esoteric level. And what I think we have is back then, what we really have when we boil this down is the Promethean story of the people that wanted the fire and the people that immediately wanted to give it back and said, this knowledge, this higher person is only for God. This higher thinking is only for the higher people. And so the ones that are for throwing that away, this is obviously societal people who need somebody above them up until they have a king or a whatever to give them all the spirituality and bless them and tell them they're good and what to do. That's society. Where tribal things, you are looking at rugged individualism, and these people wanted the Promethean fire. They want to go out and live life and not have somebody tell them how to do it. So I think this is just the classic story that we're losing. The ones who wanted the fire are dying, and we're very few and far between. But I don't think it was ever a great number. I think the reason that we say the term breakaway civilization is because it was always a tiny little group inside. Even when you look at like the Thule or any of those, these was like what, 100 people out of an entire society, and they broke away and disappeared and live a different life. You know, like, this is never a en masse thing.
Yeah, I see your point. I see your point, and I think what I'm saying is that, again, a Taoist society would look quite different. I think it would be similar to what you guys are describing. It would have to get like smaller groups, smaller local government, and to where you don't even really need it, or you don't even have to pay attention to it. Like, there's a quote in the Tao Te Ching that the best government is the one that people don't notice. Right. So it's so hands off, like maybe there's some decisions being made, but it's in general, you are self-sufficient. It's just I guess my perspective is this philosophy in general could get us there, like in terms of actually truly helping a person, internally to change that way. But again, I'm an optimist, and I do see what you guys are saying. Because I also don't necessarily believe it's going to end in a bloody war, but so I'm hoping to promote an idea that could help it end without going that way.
Yeah. Can I ask that thought? I mean, like the Tao Te Ching itself, the Tao is 3 words: Tao Te Ching. Jing is a scripture, it means like a serious book. The De is a ethics, like moral, and then the Tao is the way. So the translation, it means, the way of nature and its morals, basically. And so part of the book is governing self improvement and higher ideals. And then there's a bunch of chapters in the second part of the book that talk about governance. So I mean, like in the sense of, can it exist outside the monastery? Yeah, because it's basically giving people rules of how to conduct. And it's literally giving rules for rulers how to rule. I mean, like one of the chapters that talks about starvation is because of people being taxed too heavily for their livelihood, and that's why they starve, because of the taxation. And so if people are unruly, it's because those above them are too active. So it's kind of like there are various chapters in the book that will give rules of how to be a good ruler, basically, and follow these codes. So I would say it certainly can exist in a secular society. It's not just for monastery.
See, I was unaware that, and I did to my defense, I did ask specific that almost for that specific thing you just stated. I don't know where to find it, but I did ask for it because, well, just where to find that information. And you weren't privy to it because you're not in the Telegram group, but because of my absolute ignorance on the subject, I did ask if there's any information I could find stating this kind of thing. So whether this would have an application to society. So, which isn't in a criticism of anybody else. I did ask this because I was curious and trying to do somewhat due diligence on the subject ahead of time, so that way I would be prepared to talk about such things. Because now you listed a prescription with it, that has a set of rules, which definitely sounds very contrary to what the opening part is. So it almost sounds like this is more of an esoteric or an exoteric, and what the other part is the spiritual, more esoteric parts of it. And I did not know that there was a more application. Obviously, there's definitely no YouTube videos talking about that or anything like that. And like I pointed out with John, which, I wasn't criticizing him because I run into the same things. Unless you're heavily researched on something, it's hard to even get into the heavy research because you got to have a foot place to go to, and that foot place is Google, which is
research. So I'm sure you can research it. It's just some things they kind of like you have to find them out, passed down orally. So like some of these definitions I get from my teacher. Maybe if I looked it up, it would take me forever to find that exact definition. It's like even the word Tai Chi Chuan is so misinterpreted. There's also 3 words, and it's people just assume it's. I think a literal Western definition is Tai Chi Chuan. Well, Chuan is fist, so it becomes supreme ultimate boxing. That's the Western definition of it. If you look it up on Google, that's what you'll see. So just that word itself, supreme ultimate, makes it sound like it's the best, but actually that's not what it means at all. So the Tai Chi just means yin yang. So it's like yin yang boxing actually, or like that kind of thing. Like it's or Tai Chi fist. It doesn't mean the best, but people read that, and that's the Western definition. You look up anything on Google, that's what you'll see. So sometimes you need sort of a Chinese person. Actually, even a lot of Chinese people don't know the right definition. So you need someone from that kind of lineage to pass it on. So like something like Dao De Jing, that's how I learned it from my teacher. But you might find it on Google somewhere, but it won't be easy.
So John's probably not even experienced it himself.
Well, I would say too with that is like every different version of the Yi Jing or the Tao Te Ching that I've read is worded differently. Like the translations are different. There's a different feel to them. I had one that I loaned to somebody, and I wish I could get it back. To me, that was the most beautiful poetic version of it. But like it's like just slight change of the word, but it makes a big difference. But Ben, yeah. I didn't realize you were asking for how Yi Jing specifically applied to government. I would have showed you this, but like I was trying to find one the other day, but this is chapter 57. Use regularity to govern nations. Use regularity to govern nations. Use irregularity to deploy troops. Use disinterest to take the world. How do I know that is so? By this: the more taboos in the world, the poorer the people become. The more conveniences people have, the more benighted the nation. The more the crafts of the people, the more oddities arise. The more legal codes are promulgated, the more thieves there are. Sages say, if I contrive nothing, the people will govern themselves. If I like tranquility, the people will correct themselves. If I am disinterested, the people will prosper on their own. If I have no fancies, the people will naturally be simple. So I guess it's leading by example.
Well, I wish we would have started with this. Now we have somewhere to debate from. Okay. Now we got somewhere to debate from. So this sounds very much to me like a very aligning similar to libertarian type ideology, very, very similar. And also like the Mark Passio type of setup. I can see where the two are fairly similarly parallel. Then the problem with that always is reality. So people aren't that awesome, and I would like them to be, but they just aren't, and they aren't by their own choice. That there's glaring examples historically, and one of the easiest ones is the Marquis de Sade, where all he had to do was put out these really fucked up sexual pictures, and the general public went nuts with it. They're like, all of a sudden they're doing more crime, and they're ready to, and they are just frothing for these pictures, where they had to literally put this man in a hole and give him no writing utensils and no ability to have any access, and they had to have multiple guards because people were bribing the guards so heavily in order to try and keep getting this just absolute degenerate. Like he would cut holes into the people that he was having sex with, because in these stories and illustrations, because the holes that they were provided with weren't enough, and things like that. And the general public loves that kind of thing. They go to it. We look, today's libertarian idea is this tiny step from liberalism, where allow any type of behavior because anything's acceptable. Again, with the whole laissez-faire, let it all happen. Well, that's how you end up with guys in skirts dangling their nuts in front of your kids and reading a book and pretending like it's good for the kids. And in that type of structure, I'm not allowed to go up and split his skull, and I should be. So yeah, that's now in heathen society, it's not so laissez-faire like that. There's very different sets of rules in treating your friends and how you treat the people that you're around, and how useful and how helpful you're going to be with them. And then people who would show themselves as your enemies, and people who would live so far out of your range that they're absolutely unacceptable. Which we didn't have jails, didn't have things like that. If you're going to live like that, you're banned from society. They'll kick you right out. You are a leech. You're harmful. You're a predator, and you're not a productive member of society. In today's welfare United States, where we all pretend like everything's so hard, we actually live like kings and are given more than any society ever in the history of man. And what good has it done us? Has it produced good people?
I would just say that again, the problem is with the people. So how do you change the people? You can only change them through the mind, and actually they have to change themselves, but you can help the process along through education and, getting a message out there to, widespread as you can, to young people about this perspective on the world. Because again, like your assumption that we have to resolve those problems with like chopping that guy's head off, right there on the spot or whatever. Like, I think that's what has led us to
wouldn't normally be the prescription. That is a very, very small, rare prescription. The ones going after our kids, that is definitely the prescription.
Well, in Taoism, I mean, it wouldn't even have got to that state. Like, it's not about how do we handle it. Do we cut the guy's nuts off or something? It's the fact that you wouldn't even have people like that in the society, in the Taoist society, because it goes against nature, the natural way. It's so unnatural for this kind of behavior that it wouldn't have even arisen in the first place. But now that we have to deal with it, that's another matter. But I can tell you, Taoism itself wouldn't be necessary punishing.
You understand that even inside. So there's a reason that an anomaly is called an anomaly, and you can look at this the same as you can look inside your body. So no matter what, you have had cancer 100 times. Marcus has had cancer 100 times. I've had cancer 100 times. All of us have. And what a cancer is an anomalous cell inside of your body that doesn't match the other cells around it, that it's not operating quite right. And so this is a normal thing. Now, again, your body's had this hundreds and hundreds of times all over the place. That's okay. That's okay. When it's a problem is when it forms enough of them together to start causing a tumor. And then further, when it's a malignant tumor that then starts convincing the other cells around it to be like it, which is a real problem. Now, I don't see any society short of this magic utopia of heaven where the anomalous individual does not happen. That is just a function of the world. Like, even for myself, where a lot of people would assume that I was extremely anti-gay, I've had gay animals on my farm that were distinctly gay. It's not the norm. I've had thousands of animals, and that's only happened a couple times. That's what an anomaly is. Something that only happens once in a system that is typically very even and very similar. But anomalies still happen. The ghost in the machine. There's no getting rid of it. And if your society is not prepared to do that, whether you can say that that person wouldn't exist, that person normally wouldn't exist in heathen society either. But once he appeared, the axe to the head, that's just for people that would hurt our little kids. And I will hold that position. I don't care. You come after my kids, that's what you get. But for everything else, there was called Skegamar. And that meant you were banished from society. You have become such a cancer to our society and a bad thing that you're being harmful to us. So you need to get the hell out, dude. And you don't get to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I can guarantee that's what would have happened in Taoism, because, it's like you're talking about cancers. So the Chinese medicine is based on Taoism too. The Chinese approach to things like cancer is not about cutting it out or radiating it, which is the Western way, is just destroy what's bad. It's to bring up the good. You understand? So like you bring up the healthy cells. That's how it works. And the yang overtakes the yin and basically dispels. So it's the same thing in the society we're just talking about now. It's not to say that there's never been somebody like that might have the desire to dress up, but it's because the fact it's become so normalized now. It's become like it's just become accepted. But back in the day, let's say going back to a Taoist society, maybe it was one person. They wouldn't have had the guts to go out and do that, or have a drag queen story hour or something like that to begin with. But then if they decided to do that, they would soon learn they would be, ostracized too. It'd be the last time they did it. I don't know if they would necessarily say have their head cut off, but they would be out. I mean, it's not to say that there have never been these anomalies. They exist, but it's whether it becomes accepted and it's okay. And that's how this society is now. Obviously, it's a very degenerate, satanic, society we're in now. But regardless, I think that it's just a different approach. It wouldn't have been commonplace. And I'm not saying that somebody wasn't born a certain way, but they would not have been acting on that, So it's all about the education. I mean, if you're taught morals, it goes back to I think Buddhism works in the prison system. It's like if people are actually taught cause and effect, then they understand more the result of their crime. It's not just on impulse. So I think it's the same with this kind of thing. If people are actually taught what's right, then chances are they probably won't have that desire. But even if they did, it would be so suppressed. It would never be acted upon, that kind of thing.
So you would actually use a prescription of shame, because which I'm not actually debating against, because my thing is that the biggest thing that we're missing in this society is shame. Like if people had some shame and we were allowed to shame people instead of being like, oh, it's okay, you're 400 pounds and can't get up off of your couch, but you're still shoving 5 pounds of food in your face at once. No, you're beautiful. No, you should be shaming. So they switch doing these self-destructive behaviors at the very least. That would be also your prescription.
My prescription would be they need to go like train and to meditate at a temple, learn to meditate at a temple, like or learn to meditate anywhere, but specifically at a temple. You go.
They don't want to meditate. They want to eat Little Debbie's. What do?
That's why I'm saying you have to get this out there to like younger people. It's preventative, right? Like you have to educate the masses to, because I mean, look, I see what you're saying. I understand. I know how reality is right now. The young people are mentally disturbed. They're depressed. I see it a lot. I see that happening. And I talk to these people about these ideas and it doesn't go in, but I still believe that it does have the power to help those people. Now it's an uphill fight, but again, like you said, on the bad side, if that bad cell, it starts influencing people around it and more people or cells start behaving that way, then the other side comes back and you can have a healthy, sustaining society. But again, within Taoism, there is always the other side. So it's, I guess where we're at now is at the low end of it. I'm saying Taoism can bring us up as a philosophy. And so, yeah. Anyway,
the way that your body deals with it is it isolates it. That's why those cancer things turn into little lumps. It isolates it and then fills that with fluid and keeps it away from the rest of your cells. Like, no, that dude's retarded. Like, that's the way your body deals with it. I do love your optimism, John, and I love that you deal with children. You are the person that should be dealing with children. I can't say that in reality I find where there's ever been a society that's enlightened in the way that you would like it to be. I think that even in the Tao, as I look it up, 9 million people practice Tao, which is what, a pimple on China's ass, give or take. Like that's a village there, give or take, in China. So, and that actually they include Taiwan in that. So it says China and Taiwan. So that's what, like 8 trillion people, and or something like that. Like all the people. It's them in India, and then a couple white people smattered around. Wait
till you see my version of it. No, just kidding.
Right. But I like the idea. I just I like where Adam goes with things. I think John's version and Adam's version is I think John's version's a little more Disney. But again, he's one of the people that are bringing in that next generation, and I love your optimism on that. And I don't have lack of optimism of the children. I don't think generation to generation we've gotten any better or worse. I think that 95% of people just, that's not what they're interested in. And because I don't view the class system in the way that a lot of people do, where the lower class is these horrible people and the upper class is these fantastic people. And I understand in the Western world, that's what we've been taught. But on a basic farm, like I'm going to use an example of a kid that he always wanted to be called Nino, which just meant boy. That's literally what he asked to be called. And that wasn't his name, but most white people slaughtered his name. So he just wanted to be called Nino. And that he didn't, and Nino literally did not even speak English. And he came down to my farm because some other fellas had taken him from Guatemala and brought him over here to help grow pot, and their pot grow got busted. And these other Guatemalan folks just left Nino high and dry and up there. And since they didn't make any money, he didn't earn any money, because that's the way the growing the pot works around here. Is you're paid on a percentage of whatever the end harvest is. So if there's no end harvest, you got no money. And because the bosses didn't make no money, they sure weren't about chucking him a whole bunch of money to take care of himself. So they literally just left him in a tent up at the top of the mountain here. So this kid comes wandering down, and he's hungry and wanting to do work. Well, this kid don't speak English. He's obviously the low man on the totem pole. And I have employees and I have a business and everything else. Is this guy trash and I'm some kind of treasure? No. He's eating the same food I'm eating, because guess what? When that kid was here, oh God, like I had a hard time. He wore me out just lining him out with stuff to do. Sweet God, like give me 5 of those. I might freaking build an empire. But that doesn't mean that because I'm the decision maker and I'm doing certain things that I'm a better person. Because the fact is I can't do the work that guy can do. I can't. I cannot physically keep up with that guy. And he did not know how to line himself out, and didn't. Most people, at best, if you tell them a project, they might be able to complete it. And we all know this. You line a person out with something to do, you come back 10 minutes later, they ain't got it. And for them to actually be the person to come up with the idea, that's a whole different level of people. And so this is the class system, and it's only when it's a stagnant class where you're born into it and you're the leader class, even though you don't exhibit any of the leader skills, well, then that's bullshit. But if it's a natural class in heathen society, if you were a bad leader and you weren't proving yourself to be good, oh no, you didn't get to stay. That it was very, very you did the work, or else you don't do, or else you're out, buddy. And so it's only when it's a stagnant thing. But the fact is in the world, there's only ever going to be, the reason that there's the top 1% is the top 1%, because there's always going to be that top 1% of intelligent people. There's always going to be people that are decent. What we need in our world today is a few good men that are the ones that are intelligent, have decency, and also maintain physical skills in real world applications. All 3 in one person. We need a few of those dudes to start running the show, instead of letting all the idiots that don't even know how to feed themselves, that are living on welfare, shoving a 10-pound log of ho-ho in their mouth while they can't hardly get themselves up to go to the bathroom, and telling them how to run society. That don't function.
Okay, I got a zinger for you. The reason why Taoism is a preferable religion, or in terms of your connection to God, is because, in my opinion, Taoism gives the true definition of what God or even the source is, and that it's not anthropomorphized. So I prefer the Tao over heathenism, because they don't anthropomorphize any gods. They're talking about the spirit that runs through all the gods.
I'm not sure. So again, this is going to be a more of a ignorance point rather than a point. So the classic understanding is that heathens, even as an Odinist, that Odin is the creator god, and that's not true. And that's not even the way it's understood in heathenism. Odin actually has a father. Odin's father is Balderson. Balderson and Besla have Odin, Vili, and Ve. So Odin's got 2 brothers. There's other beings around. He's not source as you're proclaiming it. Now, where I would say, from what little, and again, this is my own ignorance, from what little I've seen, where Taoism goes wrong is it's a top-down system where everything comes and descends out of this source, this unknowable thing, if I recall the way it was said. So it's funny that the prescription for societal things is something unknowable as described. That was kind of, just hilarious. But I get what you're saying 100%, but it's just funny the way it sounds like, yeah, my prescription for the way everybody should do things is the great unknowable. Yes. Okay, Gandalf, motherfucker. Yeah, but what little, again, I caught from it, it was a descending paradigm. Now, in heathenism, while Odin is who or other gods are who we align with, there's an understanding that we live in Midgard, okay? And in Midgard, we're able, because of just the physics of things, in a metaphysics sense, this is great too, right? The physics is what's fucking us up in the metaphysics. We're sounding awesome. Totally is going to work out in a fucking regular debate, and my pen decided to fucking stop working.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick that, yeah, there's nothing, to me, that's more, that would make more sense to people. Like, and again, I'm connecting Taoism with Buddhism, but like in Buddhism, they don't ever talk about God, but they do talk about this spiritual principle of cause and effect ultimately. And that this is this impersonal force that is the creational force, that is why we're here. And it's actually, more recently, I've realized that it actually goes beyond morality, which is kind of interesting. But as Adam made the point yesterday when we talked about this, that in order to tap into that source, you are going to be behaving in a less harmful, more what we consider moral way, because you can't reach that frequency if you're vibrating on some other level.
I do have one question now. If this was a heathen society being taught, is it possible to follow that without, are you worshipping the gods? Is that part of it? You have to do that, or is that separate?
So it's a polytheistic society, so in no way would you have to worship the gods. But then also it would be hard pressed to call things a religion. So like when you read the Havamal, the things in there are like more like Proverbs type things rather than religious type things. Like, if you have a good friend, do not let the grass grow on the path between you. Friendships die where long grass grows. Is that a religion? Or is that just, if you've got a good friend, you should hang out, you should keep renewing that friendship so that way it's maintained? Is that just worldly wisdom? I don't, there's not near as many religious connotations where I don't, where most, so what, from the way it's almost sounding is like Buddhist is the esoteric. And by the time you boil it down to Tao, you're down to the exoteric. I don't know that there is a particular today group that you would call the esoteric of heathenism. There's individuals. So in today's setup society, there's one individual called a Vikki, and a Vikki is almost equal to the chieftain, but he's also not part of the group. So he's not really subject to all those things. He's just a different dude. He's the rune reader. He's the, and you can see from the stories, even classically, that there's always that dude outside the village that kind of lives different than the village, but they still respect what he's got to say and whatnot. And that's more of the spiritual Vikki. And then we had the Sorry, I'm trying to make this diagram at the same time. Then we had the seers, which was, like your vulvas, which was your female side. Now, the whole reason that this happens where we only talk about some gods, John, then Odin is an Asgardian, and we live in Midgard. And then we also have Hel. So in the stories, we can deal with people from Asgard, or we can deal with people from Hel, because we're in Midgard. So it's a 3-part system. Well, we can only deal with just the very edges of these parts. Well, then Odin can deal with the elves, or the guy, anybody from Asgard can deal with the people from Elfheim and Vanguard. The people from Hel are able to go lower and deal with these people. So it's just a recognition of that. It's not that we think Odin is the creator god. Now, when you're talking about anything that's descending, this system didn't just descend from here top down. There's this system comes here, this system comes here, and the two get pulled together by the All-Mother, which is what your story seems to be representing. And the All-Mother, or the higher side up here. And it's when these two collide that this side is basically, you could call this infinite potential, and you could call this side absolute, what would you call it? Infinite potential, and
you could call it entropy.
Absolute structure, maybe.
Yeah.
Where
it kind of looks like this.
Right. Where this side is where the structure is coming from, and the other side is where the potential, the life potential, is coming from, and it's where the two meet is where we live. So it's not a descending, and that's, again, could be completely out of ignorance, like John just put up the yin yang, where it's obviously the same balance. But from what I heard from the few things in my abilities to, when I was trying to do some pre-investigation, you got to do some due diligence. Obviously, Adam is not a debater, so I wasn't able to go out and look at his other information. But if you're going to go debate somebody or debate a topic, you obviously should check it out ahead of time. But again, just like with heathenism, the information out there is 99% garbage. I get that. Not blaming anybody for it. Not us, anyways.
So let's return. Can we return to the zinger, John? State your zinger again, and then that was Balderson's response to your zinger. I think your zinger was the source of all those not anthropomorphized in Taoism.
Yeah, that it's, to me, a preferable religion to teach, or philosophy, would not be anthropomorphized. It would go straight to the creational force, which, yeah, that's my opinion.
And Adam has a response.
Yeah, I'll just back that up. Basically, I mean, Taoism, going back to the creation, is not top down. It just, there was nothing, then there was something. That something created one created two, male, female, yin yang, and then it became the 8 situations and outward. So really, it's about harmonizing with.
Did you say 8? I'm sorry, it's your accent. Did you say 8?
8 situations.
Interesting.
Buys 8 was situations. So and it also comes back to I Ching, which is a binary system for prediction, but everything comes kind of from that. So it's basically
really,
really, yeah. And so basically, it's about harmonizing with nature, the forces, and not worshiping nature itself. It's just harmonizing, finding balance with it, the natural order of things.
Yeah, that's a dead match right there, though. The way that functions, between the two.
Gentlemen, I feel like I've been set up. You asked me to be your moderator, and you're agreeing on everything again.
Blame John. He's way bigger than you, though. I don't know what you're gonna do about it.
So then I'm going to step in as maybe a third party to argue against both of you to say that in a Western society, which is based off of maybe Judaic
Hey,
and
listen,
Christian
you
and
fucking
Abrahamic ideas.
Christian Trinitarian. You were already ripping off my paper, reading off of it over here. You don't even get an argument. I know what yours is because it's my argument.
Cheating the sheet. So that my question then is for both sides in Western society, specifically say England, America, English-speaking society, Western society, could your worldview, your idea, your philosophy that you've outlined tonight, could it survive the cultural appropriation through this idea? If we see like when the Beatles come to America and they start talking about yoga and these ideas, and the Christians push back and say, no, from a Christian perspective, we have to view the founding documents of America, the Constitution, all the amendments, this type of thing. They'll always view it through a Christian worldview. So can it survive through the existing reality of the systems and the culture of America and England, English-speaking audience? Could it survive intact with all the beauty and the points that you've argued in favor of? Could it survive through this cultural appropriation? And then side question to that, which relates to it, is your idea a race, an ethnic, and ground-based physical on a map philosophy? Could it survive in the melting pot of America and England?
Wait a second.
What are you showing us there, Adam? It's not.
I don't know why.
Stop moving. Stop. There you go.
My words are very easy to understand.
We get it. We still have these problems.
I would say, to answer that question, I do think it can survive. I think it has survived. I guess the way Ben was describing, you could look at it as esoteric in that way. But clearly, yeah, I would say that there are entities which, Christianity is probably one of the tools of those entities to keep us from spirituality. And I would say that the neo-pagan movement probably rose as a response to the empire and what we have now. Because, I mean, from what I've read, I could be wrong, Ben, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that like it kind of came up in the 60s, this neo-pagan where they kind of brought back heathenism and the ideas. And
American heathenism. And then also not just the 60s, because the 60s. So when you're looking at the 60s, that's correct. The heathenism that's most prominent in America today is based off of what's called the Asatru Folk Assembly, AFA. And so that was basically incepted by Stephen McNallen in the 60s. Not a fan of McNallen myself. He's still alive, actually, still around. So this isn't some ancient thing. And then when even further, to actually further John's point, the Wiccan movement is only from the early 1900s. So what he is calling the neo, and I would absolutely say leave that neo on there, movement is very new, but there is other non-neo movements that have existed and have always been. And the neo, one of the ways you can tell the neo-pagan movements, they will bring in any pantheon of gods. So like one of my favorite sayings is they treat gods like Pokemon cards. So they aren't going to go immediately to Thor or let's say I need the more love type energy. I would, if I was the type of person to call upon different gods, I'm not, but if I was, then I would go to Freya, or if I was going on a sea trip, I would, go to there's specific gods in that pantheon, but you can notice these people jump pantheons into other pantheons like it's nothing. And that's absolutely amazing to me. So this is all, and it's all derivative, John, of the Theosophical Society. And this was actually part of their charter where you can look up the Brotherhood, the Great White Brotherhood. And this is something incepted by the Theosophical Society in the mid 1800s, where they literally took that brotherhood, Great White Brotherhood. They sit on some island, I think it's Shambhala or something, above us, and Jesus and Sanat Kumara and whoever your favorite god is, that's a good one. He's up there hanging out with the other ones from other people, and they're all going to come down like when humanity is privileged enough and we're like needy enough or something. They're all going to come down and like super friends fucking whoop, superpowers activate and just start, fucking up society for us, and I don't know. It's some absolute nonsense that's all derivative from the Theosophical Society. And one of the biggest works that they cite in that is Gottfried Higgins, who wrote Out of Africa, which to any occultist is like you took an occultist, you put him on the heaviest drugs you could, you beat him over the head 12 times with a actual damn mallet, and then you asked him to write some stuff, and he's kind of like the Dr. Seuss of occult, just an absolute retard. His book didn't sell at all in the era that it was written, and in fact, the only reason it exists today is because his like great grandnephew or something found it rotten in a basement somewhere, and the couple copies that were left, because nobody would buy them, he pawned off on a bookstore. And today's people are so ignorant that they're like, this is genius.
I did want to bring up, just because I brought it up earlier, and again, this is kind of a more my like a very cursory reading and then going, wait a minute, is there a connection to this? But so Anglo-Saxons claim to be from the Norse, correct? Wrong.
So Saxons are Germanics. And when you're looking at it in the migration of those peoples, the Saxons are actually from Denmark, Germany, and the Baltic Sea region. Now Anglo-Saxons is a different thing. This is where the English and the Saxons started humping a little bit, and they started producing themselves some Anglo-Saxons. But by the time we're talking about the Anglo-Saxony, we've already had this is during the time period that we have like the they say the King Arthur story comes in. King Arthur, of course, being of British blood, to come in and tame all of us barbarians and show us how to be nice people. That's from that area. So you had like the Hadrian's Wall, where you had the tribal people living to one side and societal people living to the other side. And so your Anglo-Saxons kind of were the two. That would have been like King Arthur is like the epitomized Anglo-Saxon, where he's supposedly of the English tribal people, but he's where a Roman came in and probably raped a tribal woman and had a kid, and then he got sent off. The actual story then is then he got supposedly that he got sent off, was trained with the Roman Empire. It's a real similar story to shit. I'm trying to think of the name. The guy who led the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. He was taken from the German tribe, sent to Rome, trained as a Roman, got returned to the tribes, used that knowledge to help defeat the Roman Empire, and drive them off. Very similar, where supposedly he was of the tribes, but then was trained by Rome, but then was in his knighthood and duty to Rome was sent to Hadrian's Wall to defend. But yet, instead of, because he was of both sides, he didn't just beat up the barbarians, like both sides respected him and blah, blah. So that's the era that you're looking at there. So King Arthur would be the epitome of basically the first Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, so okay, I pulled it up on Wikipedia again. Wikipedia. Anglo-Saxons, in some contexts, simply called Saxons, are or the English, were a cultural group who spoke Old English and inhabited much of what is now England and southeastern Scotland in the Middle Ages. They trace their origins to Germanic settlers who became one of the most important cultural groups in Britain by the 5th century. So, yeah,
Wikipedia is so bad. So now just type in. Origins of Saxon, and that's why they had to attach on the word Anglo. Anglo English. That's why they had to Anglo-Saxon it. So, and it's funny because they even, when you're looking at Germanic, it's funny that they even added in Scottish, because Scottish is basically half Irish, because Irish is different too. Like, that's, I got the red hair. The Irish, that's supposedly descendants of Tuath De Danann, is who they're supposedly, and there's actually a bunch of people, you obviously haven't run across any of this research yet, where actually, and I don't claim any origin, I don't like any of the origin stories where everything descended from our people, but there's actually an origin out of the Tuath De Danann, and that's part of why Buddha supposedly was blonde-haired and blue-eyed and blah, blah, and everything descended from that direction, as opposed to the UN story where everything's out of Africa. Out of Africa, literally, if you look it up, was a UN charter, where they are the one who went and spread that story. It's also, they spread feminism. They also spread lots of fun things, and they didn't care what religion it was. Again, like I was saying earlier, they mushed it all together. Theosophical Society had a wing of the Catholic Church, bro. They did not care what religion you were.
So is there a wing of heathenism where they do, like, does the racial issue come up there? Because I know that didn't Hitler get kind of wrapped up in this kind of cultural belief system, and that's where he came up with root races? And I know that probably came from the Theosophical Society too, but wasn't he like he discovered that there was a root race, and that they, the Aryans are the root race? And
literally look that root race system up. That is literally Madame Blavatsky's baby. Right. Like, that is entirely them. That entire system, right. It has in no way, shape, or form is that in heathenism. That's it. And in fact, they even took some of the symbology and slightly altered it, like the Othala symbol. Theirs has wings that go up, where an actual Elder Futhark Othala, it looks like a diamond with legs coming down that are basically the same as the top parts of the diamond, almost like somebody was making another diamond but didn't finish it, coming out of the bottom. Theirs, they put little legs coming up off that. So Hitler absolutely distorted a lot of the things, but on the same token, most of what you've been fed through History Channel and things like that, and the education system, who coincidentally enough are once again owned by the same people who were the people against that story. If you ever go in and read Mein Kampf sometime, it's basically as mind-blowing as if you go and read the Unabomber's manifesto. You're like, hold the hell up. This guy was, what? This sounds very rational. Like, this makes sense. And that's what you're going to end up finding. And I think that, most movements, when you go and you look at the historical time period, World War One, after World War One, the German people, not Germanic, because Germanic was that entire Northern Europe area, where the German people, it's truncated down to that specific country. The German people, the penalties, and just like Adam was talking about with the taxes, how you get people to rebel, the penalties that were levied against the German people during the time period between World War One and World War II, a retard would have known that was going to foment another war. Like that, an entire generation of people were born that were literally slaves because they were paying penalties for actions that they had not happened in their lifetime. And so any fool would have known that was gonna. Adam just said that that's in their damn text. Like, you overtax a people, you take away everything, so they have nothing. They get mad. Ooh, that's so anybody would have known that the German people were a powder keg of some kind. And when you look at the actual literature from the Nazis and from Hitler and whatnot, and you don't take the news story you're given, it all sounds very reasonable. He talks about, in fact, very similar to today's National Socialism. He was a National Socialist. Very odd, right? And where his was promoting the German people, promoting, trying to create a good life for the people. Well, when you're getting beat down as somebody that stands up and says that, that's a very easy thing to bring up and start getting behind. And it's very hard to look at the details of it because those details aren't available to the general public. And, just like today, the same suffering that we have with our government, where none of the, I'm sure, I don't know where you live, Adam, you have quite the accent, but
yes.
I'm sure you're not like, yay, the government's the best. My government does all the right things. I mean, so you can look at those representative governments, but you can understand that very seldomly does the government actually represent the people that it's governing over. And that's never been the case. 100%.
Got anything to say, Adam?
No, I mean, I'm sure that when the book is written, I'm sure the Chinese were doing the same thing, and hence that's why Lao Tzu wrote about this as a way of governing the right way. But no doubt, it came out of people being taxed to hell, kept down. I think it's somewhere in the book too. It talks about keeping people uneducated and ignorant, which we see certainly through the media. It's exacerbated through the wonderful media we have today. Everybody glued to their information comes from a two-dimensional screen. But yeah, I think it's again, this book probably came out of the higher morals of how society should be run. But as you're saying, I think Gerald Celente said it best. When people have got nothing, when people have got nothing, it's been a long day for me, actually. My brain has just shut off. When people have got nothing left to lose, they lose it. Gerald Celente, that's just a brilliant quote. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Because why not? Why the fuck not? You got nothing to do but go up at this point, no matter where it is. You damn straight. And that mentality was the start of World War II for the German people, that these people were so beat down. Told, similar to what we're seeing, where we're seeing a white nationalist resurgence in the United States right now. Now, part of the reason that I think, John, more to the spiritual side of your question, that you start seeing heathenism come out in this. And I know, again, this isn't a debate point against you guys. This is just an explanation because neither of you are representing this in any way, shape, or form. But in Christianity, what we find is the basic philosophy is you are a born piece of shit, that nothing you do will change that fact. You could spend your entire life doing beneficial things for everyone around you and make the world a better place in its entirety, and you are still a piece of shit, no matter what, unless you go to Jesus Christ and say, I am yours and I give everything to you. And now all of that things that you did are his, and he's the only one that gets you the free pass, which you didn't earn in any way. So in my mind, Christianity in and of itself is the what our society today of absolute irresponsibility, absolute everybody being a leech. To me, that's all derivative of Christianity. That's the basis of that religion. The entirety of it is you can never be good. You must always get the free ride, and I think that's shows in everything that we have today. Whereas with heathenism, again, it's a merit-based society, and in our afterlife system, there's different areas that you specifically earn, which that's not something you guys have touched on, whether there's either an afterlife or end times type story attached with this system whatsoever, which we see in so many other religions that they have both those characteristics. In heathenism, there isn't one individual heaven for goody boys and one individual hell for baddie bads. There's just similar to the entire cornucopia of gods. There's a cornucopia of afterlives where, like, everybody talks about Valhalla. Valhalla specifically was for shock troops. So if you lived your life where you were never fearing dying, you were always ready for the fight, you were always that guy, and we've all met him, then you go to there and you get to spend eternity every day battling to death, and then coming back for supper time and enjoying a feast with the people you were just battling with in this giant practice to go to war for the end time. That's a specific person. If you were more of a farmer that took care of his family and things like that, you went over to Folkvanger, where you were going to probably go raise a family and teach children and help be part of a upcoming society. And one of them children might have been a warrior. Who knows? But there was a cornucopia of people. So there was a bunch of different afterlives. Are either of these represented in this culture?
Now, I would say Buddhism would deal with that. Taoism, not so much. But the idea is, heaven is kind of dwelling within the good man, basically. That's just the idea. And Taoism basically strives for longevity, which equals immortality. So the idea is you're aligning with Tao and you become Tao when you pass. But obviously, that's connected to the morality of it. But it doesn't really deal with punishment. So and from that inference is, if you're below a moral person, you perish, and if you are with the Tao, you carry on. But it doesn't talk about.
Is there reincarnation in this system?
This is, again, something I've not come across with Taoism. With Buddhism, yes. But Taoism never ends. So the thing is with Taoism is good ending equals good beginning. So it's kind of.
The immortality is also kind of derivative in the never-ending system, though, because you're same person, you're just re-experiencing your time here over and over and over, and it's most likely to learn new lessons every time. So your spirit has it encoded in it or some such thing. However you would want to look at that metaphysically. That's super interesting. Says the belief in reincarnation is definitely in heathenism, to the point where one of the bigger Western world criticisms is that we would kill deformed children. And that's not out of hate, and that's not out of anger. It's actually out of extreme belief in this reincarnation system. And so if I was to have a child tomorrow, and chances are that I was going to have half a dozen kids, well, them kids are all my relatives. They were people that lived before me that brought me here. They're loved ones, and they're sacred. And if one of my loved ones is born into a deformed body, they're going to have a horrible life, especially in such an independent, rugged world. And so if you go ahead and kill that one, you're not ending their life. You're just getting them a new car. Like, they're going to come back. You're not stopping that. They're still going to come back. Next year, whatever. Only next year, they're not going to be in a busted ass car. They're going to be in a Lamborghini. Like, that's going to be awesome for them. And so part of that, and I think that that's also part of the problem with the world today, is this, which you aren't representing a you only live once type with, because in that there also includes no afterlife, where you're representing an afterlife, but it's somewhat ephemeral, like not something I can necessarily grasp onto. Like, you're there forever, but are you doing anything? I don't know. It's what you've given anyways has been very, very ephemeral.
Can I ask you a question though? Like, okay, this is Buddhism. Obviously, we're not going into Buddhism, but Buddhism obviously deals with reincarnation and cause and effect karma. So I'm wondering, like, from heathenism perspective, when you, like you said about, you have a relative who's born disabled and you decide they can't survive, you basically maybe doing them the favor. So from a Buddhist perspective, cause and effect, you're talking about this person's karma led them to this case. So they have to kind of live through that karma. So if it's taken away, then will they not be reborn just the same way again? Because they haven't changed their own karma. So, like, how does heathenism deal with that perspective?
So while we do have obviously cause and effect, I don't think not that I can, unless, somebody else can go through the texts, that we have and find something representative of karma, that this basic universal almost tally system, that I don't think that there's any representative of that in any way that I've ever noticed. My question with that type of system then, and it always has been, is how does that not take into account? This is making an assumption that every single thing that's ever been is all tied together, and shit doesn't just happen. And in my reality experience, and I understand that they're then stretching this out over eons, so eventually this guy that was doing good here and doing bad things will be doing bad here, even if he's doing good things. I get that, but the fact is in your human body, which we basically, you have the all, which is what you guys, I believe, are calling source. Either you're calling the all source or you're calling Gununga Gap source. I'm not really grasping which one, because we would have to probably spend another 2 years talking to each other for us to grasp the complexities of these things. I get that. And I'm really enjoying your thing. And I understand that actually, I don't know that yours is either of those, because if that was the case, Adam is putting up numbers and things that match too fucking closely. Like, they're dead on, like the 8-part system. 8-part comes from the 3-part, that while 3 doesn't seem to go into 8, 3 actually makes 9. You're standing on 1. So that 1 that you're standing on, even if there's 9 spots, you're standing on 1. There's only 8 paths. So that's why 8 is always 9. And that's how that all pans out in the mystical sense. So I get where this is coming from, and I can immediately make these leaps because it's the same fucking system. So I can't honestly say that I think that.
I found a concept maybe close to cause and effect. It's and again, it's it's word, like WYRD is a concept in Anglo-Saxon culture roughly corresponding to fate or personal destiny, and it's the cognate term to word in Old Norse is with a similar meaning, but also personified as a deity.
Yeah, it's weird.
It is weird.
That's how it's pronounced, and that's why when you say you're weird, I don't take that offensively. Person that is not weird, here's what's interesting about this, is this kind of makes a recognition between normal people and people that are a little different. And so a weird person is a person that actually takes control of their destiny. A not weird person, a normal person, is a person that they're already woven into the pattern. They're doing what they're supposed to. They get in that spot. This is where you belong. This is where you belong in this picture. That's where you go. And they're like, yes, thank you. Where a weird person takes control of the weave and says, maybe I like this a little better, and will change the pattern. And so that's literally what weird means. And then the Urd is from the well of Urd, URD. Where that's the well that they the three Norns who control the web sit around the well of Urd. And again, that number of 3 actually equaling the 3 overlapping, equaling into the 8, which is what Adam was talking about. That, so I was like, no shit.
Yeah, that's the
Trinity.
the symbol of the runic compass is very similar to the 8 trigrams, and it'd be interesting. I don't know. I think you guys interviewed on Weaving Spiders the Thunder Wizard.
No, I do know who you're talking about, though. Feel free to keep going. I do.
He's kind of meshed these two belief systems just in his own personal life, and kind of how he teaches. He has like a Thor meditation, but
I enjoyed his rune meditation where he was orally doing the runes. It's been like 7 years since I heard it, but it was I thought that 3 videos he did each of the Futharks, I thought it was pretty excellent.
Yeah, but I do think in looking at this, I'm not surprised. There are connections, and I think where I would say a distinction lies is that the Taoism does seem to be a bit isolationist, where heathenism is more focused on social bonds and relationships in its stories and folklore. Now, again, there is another book called the Zhuangzi, which is like considered one of the top Taoist books too, which I've never read. But it's more poetic, and that may get into more like personal stories. But
by Chang Tzu, he was the one who said, talking to his disciple, who had a dream, and he said, he dreamt that he was a butterfly, and he said, well, how do you know you're a man dreaming of a butterfly and not a butterfly dreaming you're a man? Just full of those kind of poetic ideas.
Yeah, but there's definitely connections. I actually did a search on did they ever cross paths, but it said they most likely would not have culturally, except through the Silk Road.
Well, I said we had the Huns in between us, and the Huns were a pretty you just didn't fuck with those people. There was just no reason. Like, they were angry dudes. Actually, in the Eddas, some of the characters are Huns, because the heathens and the Huns faced off a few times. Unlike Rome, we didn't kick their ass. It didn't go like that. It wasn't great. So we said, we don't like fighting these guys. Let's not do that. So to the point where even again, current day, there's the overlap where you see a lot of people talk about Tartaria today, which if you actually put any study into it, well, you're going to pop up with a whole bunch of old world. This was some kind, then that's some weird stuff from today. But what you'll end up finding is that pre-Russia, again, Russia being the Varangian guards that were released from service, and that was the land that they were allowed to settle after their release from service. Current day Russia overlays the Tartarian Empire, which they were nomadic, so it's not like they were conquering a city, but it was kind of like moving into a Wolverine's range. Like, even though he wasn't there today, that's still his range. When he gets here, he's gonna be mad. He's not gonna be cool with this. And so these were nomadic people, and so you see that overlap right when you overlay Russia onto old school Tartaria, where that was literally Vikings and heathen, or Vikings and Huns interacting, and we don't get to what John's talking about until we get down into what we're talking about right now. They call Indo Europe, and then you get down into Indo Europe or Indo Asia, and then you get down below that, you get into actual Asia, where it's what these guys are representing. So there was a swath of real badass people in between that you just didn't want to cross for no reason.
I'll say this too. I know we're probably coming to an end pretty soon, but I've kind of come to this idea that, you know, Christianity, it kind of bastardized Taoism too, in a way, where it kind of made Jesus a bit of a rabble rouser. And I kind of think it's kind of like put us on a path of like, we have to resist this evil. And like, you know, it's, I don't know, it's, you know, he says he's the way, you know, he kind of presents that, but then he has to get killed. So if you live that way, you're going to get killed. There's some psychological stuff going on there. I just think that, you know, it's just,
he got killed for you, John. Why are you talking bad, John? Look at, he died for you. What do you mean psychological stuff?
I think he's like I think Christianity is the militant arm of Judaism and Rome, maybe, you know, maybe a combination of both. But anyway, that's another topic. It's past 2 hours. We're gnawing on the bone. I'm passing it to whoever.
I feel like if we had an Abrahamic in the room, that would be an interesting debate. We just don't have one of those available. Where I would, if I was debating an Abrahamic, the first place I would go is that, similar to Alexander the Great, one of the areas this discussion started at, where Alexander the Great's conquering philosophy was let people keep their traditions and their holidays and pay their taxes to me and we'll all be good. So in my opinion, Christianity was always an invented Abrahamic psychological weapon, as John said, in order to put down the Saxon and Germanic people, in order to suppress their psyche. And in order to do that, they had to incorporate many elements of heathen worship and religious practices in everything from Christmas to the Trinity to Easter, which, again, if you look at an actual match that to the Israeli area, like even something so simple as reindeer. There's no reindeer in Israel. They don't exist there. They never have. It's just not from there. Where are reindeer from? Greenland. You know, the frozen north, where all the stories are from. Santa Claus, who magically looks just like Odin and rides on this thing called Odin's Wain, which this goes to the sky clock that Real Ryan or Die is asking about, where Polaris, the heathen people, were a polar people, and Odin's Wain is the dipper that swings around Polaris, and then that's the tree is Yggdrasil, and then as the season gets longer, Santa's thing swings out, and then it swings back in as it goes up, and the seasons get shorter, and then they get longer, and that's Santa going up and down that chimney with glee, blah, blah, blah. All those things are super easy to match, even the flying reindeer, because we have a red and white Amanita muscaria mushroom, which the reindeer themselves would eat and then piss in their own mouth to get extra high from it. But hey, that's an Israeli story, right? And so they subsumed our things in order to, and kept our holidays in order to, because the common person, if you still give them the same days off, and you still let them do pretty much the same things, they don't really care what the name is. Oh, I'm paying taxes to King George. Oh, I'm paying taxes to John. Same.
And that seems to be answer to the question I asked earlier. Does heathenism, does Taoism survive the cultural export from its place of founding to another location. So if we have this multicultural American melting pot situation where we're now importing a larger Muslim audience, and now you guys are arguing or not arguing, do we bring in more of a heathen perspective into our governance and society? Do we bring in more of a Buddhist society? So if in an organically forming, without subversion, without any sort of grass roots efforts, in quotes, to door-to-door knock on your door and ask if you want a Watchtower magazine, or if you want to learn about Jehovah or or be a witness to this entity. So with multiculturalism in an English-speaking culture, having the difficulty of having the original idea survive, in this cultural appropriation idea where we can go to a Target store and buy a Buddha statue. Right. So it's sort of what you're talking about, Balderson, of the Super Friends idea, or the Pokemon Pantheon of, we recognize all of the world's stories, but then in our living, we reject them all because we're Americans. So because America has the founding story of pilgrims on the Mayflower who came to bring order and peace to a land ruled by redskin Indians who were backwater and killed each other, and they were a warring faction within themselves. So then white guys come, find a rock, build a church, and then they were escaping religious persecution. So they come to America, and then somehow time passes and the religious persecution shifts. So now the ruling philosophical, exoteric, religious, philosophical idea begins to impose all of its ideas. Now, maybe we'll get to a week where we'll address the issue of Christianity being used to suppress heathens. The question might be asked, for or against the idea, was Christianity formalized in literature and oral tradition for the sole purpose of a governmental control system? So was it used to suppress heathens all along, or was it a natural, organic, a real carpenter born in a manger, the story of a literal Christ figure born of a virgin? Did that literally happen? Was it organic from the very beginning? And then at some point, as people got to take it onto themselves and write documents and literature and poetry based off the ideas, did it become something else? That's a separate argument. We'll need to find people, multiple people, with a position where they are defending Christianity through apologetics, through literature, through history and all this. We're not defending that position. We don't have that knowledge. We don't have that passion to defend that position. We're talking and ending our discussion tonight about heathenism and Taoism, and how both ideas may share some similarities and compatibilities. There might be a deeper perennial philosophy that they both share. And if those ideas could survive and thrive and have a positive influence to the decline of Western civilization. Gentlemen, do we have any final remarks or arguments or jabs or zingers?
As to what Marcus said, and I'm sure John and I are actually on the exact opposite page of this, not that we don't both want to end up at the same spot at the end, to be honest. And the same with Adam. I don't know that Adam's actually not more on my page with this particular thing. John seems a little bit more pie in the sky, and Adam seems a little more on the realism end of things, where I think John is going to believe that it is possible for some excellent religion to come in and just be so enlightening, and people find so awesome that they just suddenly become awesome people. And I don't believe that there is any societal prescription at this point that is going to fix this. And I think that what I myself want to do is like John, pass some things on to the young, because the thing that I see going to happen here right now is that this society is doomed. And I'm not trying to say this is a doom, purveyor, but society is doomed. That don't mean all of us are. That means that these people living in the city, these big lecherous, cancerous spots that can't provide for themselves, yeah, those people are going to eat themselves alive. And the thing is when that first happens, the system's going to start breaking down and people are going to get hungry. Then we're going to see the worst of people. And then people are going to realize they're still fucking hungry. And then we're going to start seeing the ones who are actually understand how to do a productive system start showing up again. Like, hey guys, I know this smashing each other and stealing and all that's been fun. It's been kind of great, but you know what? It only feeds us like once every couple months, and I like eating daily. So you remember that thing where we farm fields and we start doing things like that? And that guy will already have been doing that, because here's the funny thing, and something today's society seems to have forgot, that you can't feed people out of a field you haven't planted. So we have a million gurus out there telling you all these different ways to live, and they aren't living any of them. None of these people talking about it. So eventually what you're going to get to is real dudes actually eating food, and people are going to go, I like food. and that's when we're going to start seeing competent men take charge again. And I don't think anything's going to make that happen in between besides the absolute failure of these other ways.
Okay, I'll give you the opposing view, is that through technology, through technological advancements, through more people understanding these basic concepts of just starting with breathing correctly, sitting down, closing your eyes, going inside, figuring out what you're thinking about, figuring out what's stressing you out, separate what is really there in your mind, that emptiness, versus all the signal coming in of, this material world we've created, and get into that flow. That if we can do that with enough people and put that into the education system, that I have faith in humanity, especially at younger ages, because I think if we were to teach this to middle school kids, they're probably at like the height of their power. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them are getting damaged before that, but there is a generative power within us where we create from within, without what we're projecting. So we teach these basic concepts that don't have to be framed as a religion, although I would argue ultimately it's the true religion. It's the way that we are supposed to be living in balance with nature, accepting death, accepting, the reality of what we experience. So through that, we can avoid a catastrophe or a war of all against all, as Rudolf Steiner said was inevitable, the war of all against all, that instead we could subvert that and detach from society and slowly create the same tribal system that probably Ben is talking about, but without the catastrophe. And I want to add one more thing. What if the I Ching and the code that matches in the Norse religion is the matrix code? It runs all computers, right? It's the signal that they're putting out from the freaking tower in the movie They Live, and we have to block it out. So anyway, that's my ending. Good deliberation. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I think funny enough, I'm agreeing with Ben. I see the writing on the wall. It's certain things are inevitable, but I like to have some positivity, and I do think that it's the future generations that can be educated to, everything is cycles, and so we're coming like to an end of something. As long as the future, it is taught. It's not ignored, and people have to think of the future, but I don't think it's an immediate remedy. I think also in terms of Taoism, I think the principles of it, it's a universal principle. So it doesn't have to be attached to any kind of, as a religion, it's a philosophy, it's a way of life. So it's kind of, in that sense, people can be taught to be more compassionate, to be more, reduce desires and these kind of things. But I think it's, like you say, it's a cycle. So I think now it's still, at least the children can be educated. Unfortunately, right now, I've said years ago, I said to people, if you took 100 people randomly, strangers, sit them down, tell them to sit on a chair for 10 minutes, quiet, close your eyes. I don't think many people could even do that, because culturally it's mad. It's a sickness. The mind is gone. I mean, the ability to, just to have any, I mean, what do they say? The attention span is now 7 seconds. That's what we're told, allegedly. Maybe it's not true, but for sure, I mean, you can see it.
Gross.
Huh?
Super gross. And as far as I can tell, true, like literally, and this isn't to criticize my dad, when he visited, not this time, but the time before, and I had to chew him out about it, he would ask me questions, and before I could answer, he would be watching a TikTok video. And I don't think it was TikTok, but the same, concept, 15-second clippy thing. And he wouldn't even hear my answer. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, the idea of educating children to be still, quiet the mind, and that for them, it's almost torture. So there will be some that can, but the majority now, it's just, they don't have that self-discipline to do that.
Adam, are you a teacher of these techniques?
Yeah, I do. I do teach meditation. Yeah.
And we can access that information through a website?
Some. I mean, I've got articles, but I'm trying to think of anything specifically on meditation. Maybe not. Maybe one for the future.
But that's SIFU Wallace, WALLACE.
Correct. Yeah.
SIFUWallace.com. Sifu.
Mm-hmm.
How do we say that?
Sifu. Yeah, and this means teacher. Teacher. Yeah, Wallace is the last name. So yeah. But so I believe in the hope. I like to have. I mean, I ride the waves. I mean, I know, like some people, it's all doom and gloom. I see the reality around me. I see what's happening, the rise of absolute degeneracy and this kind of thing. It's being encouraged. It's a battle right now. And obviously right now, I would say evil is ascending, but that's not to say it will triumph ultimately. It's all, like I say, like a cork riding the waves. But I think you still have to plan for the future and educate the people for the future, so that when the time comes, they also have a moral code. Yeah, that's my take.
Thank you very much for coming, Adam. It was a pleasure meeting you.
All of you guys.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, guys. Sorry for being kind of unclear maybe about what I was thinking, but
you know what? I'm not. It's not even that, John. And that's okay. We're, as these debates come up, this is something that we're going to have to come in and these people have more practice on this, so they're able to kind of hone it down. So, like when I was looking at my opening statement, like when I've heard other people speak about heathenism, they get very broad and similar to the way you did in your opening, and I'm not even criticizing your opening. I thought it was great. But where they just started, listing stories and things. And what I had to stop and think about is I had 3 minutes, and I even timed and practiced my thing. And when we go back, I'm sure it was right around 3 minutes. And, because I'm trying to, because in some debates, they're going to cut you the fuck off. You don't get to say that last sentence, which might be the key to the whole thing, right? Like, who wants to tell a joke and not get the punchline? But when I did that, I had to become concise. So I had to boil down what I was going to say in that opening, understanding that later, if there was going to be questions, I would get to flesh out some of those more keys that I had boiled it down to. And so I think we're going to have to be on that task. And this was wonderful for doing that, where we're not very antagonistic against each other. And in the future debates, where I feel like where our group is all going to mostly be going against Abrahamics, because that's 99% of the people out there of some flavor Abrahamic. It is going to get more antagonistic, without a doubt. So I think this was good. And then what we need to pull from it is just the way to harness down and narrow down the lanes, because each of the lanes was good, but where do they fit in each debate, and narrow that down, because we're 40 minutes over what we expected. Well, in a normal debate, they're going to want to keep that specific. we got to learn to be concise. Even if being concise is going to cut off some of the good information, we have to understand that people that are become interested based on what we say, we should have faith that they're going to go and study further. So that one person that does that, yay, you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We don't want to bury the headlines in debate. We want to get to the strongest point first. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We're in a soundbite culture. You guys both agree that brain rot happens when the attention span is shortened. People can't sit still. We've gone 2 hours, 40 minutes. That's probably 2 hours, 40 minutes longer than most people have an attention for on YouTube. So we do have this content available for you to download in audio form, podcast form with an RSS subscription to a feed. So you can play it back, pause it, rewind it, listen to it over and over again. That's very good. And also we want to thank our sponsor, Ricola, tonight for helping us get through this without scratchy throats and coughing.
Bring it back, Ricola.
Ricola for sponsoring us in our debate team. Thank you again.
Re-COVID. No. Oh, there go the censors. All right, guys. Good job. Have a good night.
You win.